Welcome back to the show. Men's health. It's an area that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Men are less likely to get involved in well-being activities, certainly in workplace well-being activities, unless it's something really macho. And men are also less likely to visit their GP or to speak up if something isn't right. So today's guest, Adrian Yeates, is giving a voice to men's health. Notwithstanding a long history of depression and anxiety, Adrian has worked successfully in several industries and at all management levels, including CEO. In addition to his Lizado business, where he avidly advocates for positive mental health, he is a board director of the mental health charity Aware and is an ambassador with Sea Change, whose mission is to work positively to reduce the stigma and discrimination associated with mental health problems. So it's a great conversation. I know you're going to learn a lot from it. So let's get straight into my chat with Adrian Yeates. So Adrian, hello and welcome to the Work Well podcast.
Hi, Brian. Delighted to be here.
Pleasure to chat to you. Tell us, Adrian, how are you? How's life? How's work for you at the moment?
I have to say, I'm feeling great. I'm very well and thankfully busy at work. One of the things now that's actually quite nice is that myself and my wife Liz, we're working from home now. I suppose, like a lot of people that may be listening in, we have three, I would call them children, but they're all in their 20s and they've flown the coop. So our eldest is in Dublin, but he moved out a year ago. And then our middle daughter, she moved to Spain 3 years ago and she actually came home on Saturday for the first time in 2 years. So It's fantastic to have her home. And we're the new family now. My youngest is in Chicago. She's doing an Erasmus over there. So We're going to be gathering together physically and virtually and people from all over the world. So I think it's kind of the new normal, but so it's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And listen, how have you found the last 2 years? How has work been? How has working from home, managing all of that? How has that been?
I think for most people, it's been a struggle at times. I'd be very honest to say that, because I suppose the key element that COVID brought was this huge amount of uncertainty. And I think that's the biggest struggle most people have is, when you don't know really what's around the corner. I think there was kind of almost a bit of excitement in 2020 when the Taoiseach said, we're going to be shutting down things. And we were all thinking this maybe last a few weeks and, sure, it's a bit different. And, if he had told us then, or we knew that we'd still be dealing with it now in 2022, I think we would have looked at it completely differently. So, it's put a huge amount of pressure on organizations. In my case, the work that I do has always been face-to-face. I'd never heard of Zoom or Teams 2 years ago. So it's very, very different. So it took a bit of a while to get used to that. And then, getting set up from home and, connections and broadband and the extra few hassles that come in there. But I think for most people, to use that phrase that's bandied around all the time, until you get your head around what's going on, I think it was very, very difficult for people. And then to see like the physical negative side and hearing about the deaths and the number of cases day after day, I mean, I think it was quite traumatic on a lot of people. And then the social connection, the lack of that. And then for older people or people who are on their own, not getting visits, no phone calls, whatever, I think that was very, very tough. So, I think it's been hard on everybody. But then there's a few positives that I'm sure we'll get on to talk about later on. But, it hasn't been easy is the simple answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Very, very well said. Bring us up to speed on the career, if you would, Adrian, because it's been a really interesting one. I mean, you were 20 years, if I'm not mistaken, in Volvo Ireland, and almost 5 of those as the MD.
Yeah.
You're involved in quite different work now. Maybe bring us up to speed on that, on the background.
Yeah, well, you're only at the tip of the iceberg, I'm afraid. I have to show my age now. I actually did a degree in international marketing and languages at DCU, and I had my first job. I started work in 1986, believe it or not. So I'd say about 80% of the people online won't have been born by then. But I worked in Xerox in a sales role to start with, and then I wasn't really using my German, so I joined an Irish company, but it was actually owned by a German that was in the beef trade. And I worked in the marketing department. We were looking to bring a beef product, a staking product from Ireland to the German supermarkets. So that was great. But I had to travel a lot, and I was away from home. My wife Liz, she was in banking at the time, and she got a job offered in the head office in Amsterdam. It was Dutch Bank. So because I'd been traveling so much, I said, sure, we'll go. We both had done the German, so we figured we'd pick up Dutch or whatever. So we moved to Holland in 1990, and that's when I started in the car business. I joined Nissan Europe as the European headquarters for Nissan. It had just moved to the Netherlands in 1990. So that was brilliant. We were living there. She was on expat terms. I got my job with Nissan. We were expecting our first kid in 1995. So as the fella said, we were on the pig's back, except I was feeling miserable. Right. And I had this whole sense of dread, like from the outside in, everything was perfect. But it was actually my first real experience of mental illness, and I didn't really know what was going on. So I was actually diagnosed at that point, it was 1994, with depression. And I think my situation was exacerbated by self-stigma. Because a lot of the staff, because the office had moved from Tokyo and it was mainly Japanese managers, and it was quite macho and male. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if they think there's something wrong with my head, I'm out the door, and then I'm going to lose my job, and then I'm going to lose my house, and I went into a whole catastrophe. Anyway, I got help, which was great, but unfortunately, I had a relapse a couple of years later. And we decided in 1996 to come back home. And I personally was delighted with that, because I had applied and got the job with Volvo. And I was thinking, I'll come to Ireland. We have 2 kids now. Nobody knows my track record. So it was all this thing about hiding. So I started in January 97 with Volvo, and I was off work sick in that September. So that was a real heavy hit to me, because I thought I'd ruined my chances, if you know what I mean. But the good thing is, and the message I'd like to get across to people is, getting the appropriate support and treatment for any mental illness means recovery is more than possible. It's actually likely. And what it means is you can live your normal life and work to your own potential, to the point that, as you say, I was appointed to MD in 2012.
And can I just ask, how did you ask for help, both at Nissan and then the September you were back at Volvo? How did you ask, or how did that come about, that support?
Well, I think this is what's so important about the conversation we're having now, because you're going back nearly 30 years. There was no support, is basically the answer. So most of the help that I got was outside. And unfortunately, we often talk in terms of the mental health continuum, so that, most people are kind of managing. We all have stress and pressures and so on, and we're anxious from time to time, but that's life, isn't it? It's when your situation gets to the point that you're not able to cope, or you're finding it difficult with decision making, with relationships and so on. And there's this lack of capacity or competency that comes in, that you obviously want to hide. So mostly at work, I was trying to hide what was going on, and then outside, I was trying to look for, what can I do about this? And one of the areas that I got a lot of help from when I came back home to Dublin was through Aware. Their online service, peer-to-peer supports, even the information about a condition. See, a lot of people, they have very simplistic views and always negative about mental illness. And the idea of actually going and find out what is anxiety, what is depression, what is bipolar, it takes a lot of the fear out of it, and a lot of the misunderstandings. And that's where I think the work of challenging stigma comes in, is to really, when you hear situations like that, to be able to stand up and say, hang on a minute, I don't think that's fair, I don't think that's right, there's another way you could say it, or, whatever it might be. So unfortunately for me at the time, there were very limited supports. But I see a huge change now, even in the last 10 years. It's just been fantastic. A lot of organizations now have their own internal employee assistance programs. There's lots being done in terms of well-being with, programs throughout the year. So not just one-hit wonders. This tick box exercise of, let's do something on mental health.
Yeah.
There's actually a red thread going through it. And even like you have people now being called the chief people officer, or you have welfare and well-being managers, and, a whole network of well-being individuals. So right through the organizations, that it's not all just top down. So I kind of wish I was born 20 years later, and I mightn't have had to go through a lot of what I had.
But you still, even though you knew it was how challenging it could be to raise this or to bring this to the surface, you were still able to do it, even with the lack of support you felt that was out there. How were you confident enough to do that, or how did you feel comfortable enough to do that? I'd say most people in your situation would have just kind of shut up and got on with it, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would. And, and I think that's, to a degree, the motivation why I did do it, because I was very secretive about it for so long. And, when I came to the end of my time with Volvo, because normally the MD role is between 5 and 7 years. So I started thinking about, what I might do, going forward. And I was coming into my 50s then, and it was kind of like, I got to be careful about what I decide to do, because I could just jump ship and go into the same, thing again, just with a different brand. But I did a thing called an outplacement program, which is where I went to a specialist agency who they kind of do recruitment, but they also do a lot of focus on you as an individual, and not just from your competency side, but more importantly about what motivates you. So they actually go very deep into your beliefs and your values. Mm-hmm. And what came out of that for me was that, I had a strong EQ, emotional intelligence, and that, people development was very, very important for me all through my career. And I'm thinking, well, sure, what can I do with that? Because 2 or 3 years ago, there was no such thing as workplace well-being. Mm-hmm. So that's really where, when that started off, I'm thinking, yeah, I can do that, but how am I going to make it relevant and authentic and, realistic for people? And that's where, I decided, well, maybe if I start talking about, because again, you have a lot of celebrities out there who talk about their mental history and so on, and it's very inspiring. And I think I often compare those guys to like icebreakers in the Arctic. They're the big ships that come in and smash up the big fields of ice. But then you need the little ships coming in behind. And that's where I see my role is that, sometimes people think they get a trigger from listening to some of these celebrity type mental health advocates, but then they don't see a relatability, say, oh, well, that's easy for them because A, B, and C. And it's not, by the way. But, conventional wisdom is it must be easier for them. So I kind of felt like if I put myself forward then, and, particularly in terms of men's health, because men typically don't open up as much as our female counterparts. We don't talk seriously about personal and intimate issues. And often, that vulnerability about being able to show your feelings and your emotions stereotypically is a weakness. And that's something you don't want to be. Big boys are strong. We don't cry. We get on with things, and we take everything in our stride. And that's just not realistic anymore. And then particularly, having worked in senior positions in organizations and having led a company, I'm trying to give people permission to say, not only is it okay not to be okay, not only is it okay to struggle from time to time, but actually I can get help for it, I can get support for it, and I can keep on doing what I've always done. So, it's not life limiting. So a lot of this stuff, and again, to go back to your question, opening up about it means, it's taking it out of the darkness, and, it's shining a bit of light onto it and saying, this is normal. We all struggle, we all have health, we all have mental health, physical health, same way. And, from time to time, we just need a lift. Yeah. So I thought if I could use myself, excuse the pun now with the car industry, but if I could use, the organization I have, Lisato Services, as a vehicle to promote that, then that's really what I wanted to do. And, I'm delighted that I've done it. And, one of the things I did was I joined an organization called Sea Change. And they're Ireland's national organisation for stigma reduction. And it's just so rewarding, Brian, to be able to go into, as it was at the time, go into a room full of people and tell your story.
You're an ambassador now.
Yeah, I'm, you know, and they have a fantastic, you know, the whole array, you know, and this is the thing, like we often just think about the common mental illnesses, but, you know, from eating disorders to psychosis to, you know, schizophrenia, you know, and everything in between. They have people with lived experience who are prepared to talk openly about that experience, so that people who are in that same position can see that there's hope for recovery, and that, you know, you're not actually in a dark place you're never going to get out of again. So I love that work, you know, and it's just so, like I say, so refreshing. And, you know, you get great feedback, people come back up to you, you know, and I mean, you kind of, like at this stage now, I don't think it's anything special. I don't think I'm particularly brave, but I think where people have been hiding like I did and so afraid to put their head above the parapet in case it's going to be shot off them, you know, I think it does.
Like you said, it's going to be a lot more relatable. If a celebrity, if an Olympian or a footballer, you know, kind of someone we know from the TV, is saying this, is doing this, it is that little bit harder to relate, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if you're going in there and the other ambassadors, you're going into workplaces and just sharing your story, your lived experiences with the employees.
But I do, you know, and I'm always careful to make the point, you need both. You know, like people just going in, you know, you need a certain amount. It's almost like marketing. You need a kind of PR machine to get the subject up there, and then you need somebody to carry the work on. So I think it works very well hand in hand. So, you know, I've great admiration for all of those people who and anyone who's prepared to, you know, share their experience such that it would be of benefit to somebody else.
So tell me, so you touched on the men's health point there, and I think it's a really important one, especially in the area of workplace well-being, workplace health promotion. It's more often than not, it's the women that are getting involved. You know, less men get involved, as you're kind of hinting at there as well. Men are less likely to visit their GP to you know, be proactive about their own well-being. They're certainly less likely to open up, put their hand up when something isn't right, and to be vulnerable. How do we, I mean, you're doing the work, how do, let's say, the HR leaders, the well-being leaders listening in, how do we encourage, or what can we do to support men in workplaces, kind of maybe just to get involved a little bit more, or maybe to, you know, to have a conversation?
I think, you know, for me, the answer to that lies in, you know, when you're actually defining what the organizational needs are in terms of employee well-being. And, you know, sometimes, you know, I think senior leaders can think, you know, oh, let's just do a survey of what's out there, what can we get, and how much is it going to cost? But I'd actually advise people to actually sit back and have a think for themselves and say, you know, I might be a senior leader, but I'm not impervious to all the issues that are going on out there. And my title or rank within the organization doesn't give me any extra protection against, you know, the slings and arrows that are there. So what would I need, you know, as a senior leader in the company? What would I need to support me? And then do a survey of the staff, you know, do a dipstick or whatever you want to call it. Because lots of organizations, like I said, nowadays, they have much more refined services than would have been around even, you know, like it's what, 2017, 5 years ago that I was at Nissan or Volvo. You know, it's got so much better. And the thing about it is sometimes people feel gaps, or they notice that things aren't as good as they would like them to be. So if you can approach the staff and say, you know, this is what we're doing, what's missing, or what would you like to see more of, what would you like to see less of, and engage. And this is important. So coming back to the males in the organization, you know, I struggle sometimes with gender from the point of view is that I think it, you know, it takes the message away a little bit, because like I say, we all have mental health. So if you have a program that's broadly based to support the overall organization, and then you might have within that survey a few extra little bits and pieces that men can do, or similarly that women can do. But I also encourage that men do step forward to be part of the discussion, Because what I see now is a lot of the organizations that I talk to, and certainly from the feedback I got on podcasts that you've done with some of your other guests, it's through the organization. It's not top down and it's not bottom up. It's actually a really good integration of both. And that's where I think, rather than looking at purely gender based, there should be a peppering of people from different aspects of the organization. And the thing about it is, most organizations are they're like us as individuals. They have their own foibles, they have their own brand, they have their own culture. So I'm always I would say reluctant to talk about a one size fits all. Mm-hmm. I really think it should be designed by the people for the people kind of thing. And within that, you should hoover up any particular needs for men within that. But it's hard to get them to, voice that. And, sometimes, again, if it's done as a, kind of a blind questionnaire, that, people can do it anonymously.
Yeah.
I think that gets the message in there. So, I definitely say that, but start from the inside, work out and talk to people. That's the best way.
And I would say the more people that are comfortable, and only if they're comfortable sharing their own story or talking about their own challenges, be they in senior leadership, which can help, or just even spread throughout the organization, that can be a huge help also.
Yeah, and just to give a word back to Sea Change, one of the things they do is specific training on managing your own boundaries and what you're comfortable with sharing. And again, like, it's very easy, like if you do a panel discussion and you're getting questions in off the floor, and then people, start to get interested, and then they ask you very specific questions, like maybe going into, what's your treatment or what medication are you on and so on. And that's really a no-go area, because what works for me won't work for you or may not work for anybody else. So, you're not there as an advocate for particular treatments. Yeah. It's about making the decision to actually go and get help. And that's the key thing, is to make the environment safe for people, that they can reach out, like in the workplace, whether it's that employee assistance program, or whether there are other services available that can help people, just to reach out. Yeah. And then it takes a life on of its own, and you get then the appropriate help. It's not just, like I say, a sticking plaster or a off the shelf. It's designed specific for your own situation. Sure. So boundaries are very, very important.
So you're a Sea Change ambassador. You're still on the board of Aware. Yeah. And you also deliver mental health first aid training. Is that right?
Yeah, I do some freelance work through Lizedo to other like-minded organizations. And again, I just find there's been a great response in Ireland to supporting mental health and organizations taking it more seriously. And, if I was to say one of the big upsides, if there are any, to COVID, is that, it's forced organizations to think slightly outside the box. Like you think about it now with remote working and all that sort of stuff. That's something that probably would have evolved over time. So, if I'm being very naughty now and say, if you start off with, go back 10 years, employee well-being was the bowl of fruit on reception, and, some funny design chairs that people could slouch around, or a table tennis table in the middle of a meeting room. Do you know what I mean? And that was the genesis of it. But what it was trying to do was just create space and give people an opportunity to disconnect for a while. And then it came into something much more formal. But I suppose as things develop, then you get the detractors who are saying, oh, that's all just nonsense. And, they just poo-poo the whole thing. But, you can see that it's about actually tailoring the organization's output needs with the employees' ability to be there and be engaged. Yeah. And, a lot of the bigger multinational organizations have embraced that. So I think it would have taken years before that would have been taken on by a lot of the other organizations in Ireland, but COVID forced that. Yeah. And now we're seeing, we're kind of at the other end of it now, where organizations are looking to get people back into the office, and, struggling with that as well. So, You know, that's where for me the kind of freelance work came up with this company called Zevo Health, and they do a whole range of dedicated workplace wellbeing programs. So they have a number of pillars. So I work with them on their mental health pillar. So I give presentations around that as well. And I actually was delighted to get involved with Mental Health First Aid Ireland, because, you know, I think they've got an excellent program, which is kind of taken in from Australia. Yes. It's a very well researched, totally, how would you call it, integrated program. It's 12 hours, so it's 2 full days of mental health first aid. And even that in itself, you know, tells the story of, you know, most organizations will have a health and safety officer or a first aid, a couple of people's trained in CPR, bits and pieces like that for physical illness. So it's fantastic to think now that you can have individuals within organizations who are trained, who understand about mental illness, who understand the signs and symptoms, and can then approach somebody who may be struggling and get them the help that they need. So they're not there to actually do the work of, you know, fixing the person, as we say.
Absolutely.
Putting them in touch with the right resource. And, you know, I think that's fantastic as well. And the more organizations that do that, again, the more normal it is to talk about mental health and well-being. So I think that's brilliant. So I'm delighted to be involved with both of those organizations.
I like the training. I think it's great. The more companies that can, you know, do that, bring that kind of training into their organizations, the better. One concern I have is that some organizations, I hear, let's say the senior leadership say, they've got mental health first aiders, they've got an EAP program, you know, they're done with mental health. We've done it, you know, it's all resolved. We're fine because of we've X amount of people in mental health first aid and we have an EAP program. Any thoughts on how can we just encourage companies to, I mean, it's an ongoing process. How can we support the mental health first aiders or whatever equivalent program? How can we support those individuals within the organizations to make this an ongoing kind of support and help them to grow and develop in their role? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I think again, when I started out in the area of workplace wellbeing in 2018, that would definitely was the biggest obstacle was how do you convince organizations that this actually has a benefit? Mm-hmm. And again, for most things, and certainly for me, I did it for many years as well, you do a very simplistic cost benefit analysis. How much is that program going to cost us and what am I going to get for it? And, you know, when finance get involved and some of the benefits are intangible in the sense that you can't put pounds, shillings and pence on them, then it kind of becomes not sure what the point of doing that is. Mm-hmm. But then I'd also, you know, challenge and say that, you know, you could easily sit back and say, well, we did our sales target last month, so we don't have to do it this month. It's done. Mm-hmm. You know, mental well-being and employee well-being isn't, you know, you can't put it in a box, and it doesn't. It's on a continuum. Mm-hmm. It's there all the time. So if you're going to have employees, you need to support them all the time that they're there. So, you know, you can avoid that, and it's one of the things that I see is companies that haven't responded, and you know, we're even going back to Darwin now. You know, the way that people say he came up with the strongest survive. Mm-hmm. The actual main thing he said was, it's those who can adapt are the ones that survive. Mm-hmm. And organizations that are still trying to manage situations in a pre-COVID outlook, I think are really going to struggle. Because, you know, you'll have heard, and it's been reported in the media as well, about the great resignation, the pause that COVID has given people to actually revalue what they're doing. Does it make sense for me to sit in a car for 2 hours each way, put my kid into a creche at 6 a.m. and, you know, is there another way of doing this? And, you know, remote working has enabled people to integrate their lives much more with their work than, you know, that classic old adage of work-life balance. You know, you can't have work-life balance because the two are just totally interconnected now. So, you know, I really think that you got to have that long-term view. You got to have a constant, like I would actually be saying, and I'm sure this is why a lot of the companies that employ people as chief people officers, is that it has to become part of a strategy, part of the company culture, you know, because what makes one company different from the other it's really about the people. And you get a lot of, you get your fancy posters about people being our greatest asset and all the rest of it. But how are you looking after those people? Would you treat the car, the fleet of cars or trucks that you use without giving them maintenance, and say, oh, we bought 20 trucks last year, so that's it, we're done. We don't need to have a mechanic in to have a look at them. Do you know what I mean? So if you look at it in those terms, and then the research is there now, particularly since COVID, like I said, and the change that I think most managers or senior leaders feared with remote work was the lack of supervision. So we're going to lose control here, and the business is going to go down the tubes because they'll all be off dusting. The opposite has happened. Yeah. Productivity has gone through the roof. Why? Because people can now work on their own terms. They can get the things they need to do in terms of work-life balance, the personal things around that need to be done for them, so that they're in the right mind space to be productive. Whereas sitting in a car or on a bus or a train for an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours every day, it's a waste of everybody's time. So I really think that idea of, some of the intangible benefits in terms of productivity really do need to be looked at. And for sure, knowing the younger audience that's out there as well, kind of like when I was in the seat on the other side of the desk interviewing people, you're more likely to be interviewed as an employer now. What's your support on this? What's your view on that? How many days for this? How are you fixed about that? X, Y, and Z. And if they don't like the answers, they won't take the job. And that's why I'm saying, if you don't change, you're going to perish, because you'll find it hard to keep good people.
It'll be interesting to see how it pans out, won't it, over the next couple of years? And I was thinking about this, though. If people vote for Donald Trump, they'll also vote for or join an organization that has this really old school, rigid approach as well. So I think they will survive, but will other companies want to do business with them, or how will it work? How will it pan out exactly? It'll be very interesting to see how things pan out over the next couple of years.
Well, the only thing I'd say on that is, Brian, would you prefer to survive or flourish?
Oh, yeah, well, to thrive. I would love to thrive.
There you go. So that's the thing. They may just be able to tick the box on, some of those older organizations. It comes back down to what the overheads are and the running costs of the business. If they've got very low overheads, and they can continue to return a profit without investing in their people, then they're happy to do that. But I'm thinking about organizations that actually want to grow and develop and move on, so as to thrive, like you say, and that's a big difference. So I would prefer to be in the thriving department.
Oh, me too. Yeah. And it does. What do you think? What will the future of work or mental well-being in the workplace look like? We have the program, some programs now, some companies are embracing it. Any thoughts, in 5 years' time? Will this be normal? Will this be kind of mandatory? Will there be chief well-being officers? Any thoughts on what that might look like?
Yeah, I think, as the fellow said, it's very hard to know in one regard because, again, unfortunately, when we came into this year, nobody thought that Russia would attack Ukraine. And, that one move has now kind of trumped to pick your last example, the COVID, in terms of headlines now, that's what everybody's talking about. And that came out of nowhere, but it's a global issue now, particularly to do with energy and so on. So it's hard to know with any great certainty what's going to happen next week, let alone in 5 years' time. But certainly for me, the trend would be that organizations need to be much more flexible, and they need to integrate work life within the company. And what that means is responding to those elements that their staff are telling them. This helps me to do my job well. This puts pressure on me. And also that there's that kind of a safe culture within the organization. So going back talking about the mental health first aiders and so on, so that you feel there's a safety net within the organization, that you don't actually have to become very unwell before somebody will actually start to look after you. When you begin to feel, because you know yourself how you're feeling, and your I suppose your well-being fluctuates on a daily basis, but there's a trend there. And if the general trend is I haven't been feeling great for the last week. It's so fantastic to know that you can reach out to somebody and have a confidential conversation, get some options. Yeah. So, again, most of the good first aid support programs, they're not going to give you solutions because it has to be individual. But to know options, where can I go with this? How can I get help with that? So I think that's really going to be the feature. And then where you do your work from. So I think at the moment, without a shadow of a doubt, the hybrid approach seems to be the most likely to continue. And again, it's industry specific. Not all industries lend themselves towards it. But I think the key thing is the flexibility, that you're not obliged to be in a specific place to do a job. If if you're digging a hole, you have to be where the hole is. Okay, so if you work on the M50, you gotta be on the M50. But for people who are generally office based with technology, you don't need to be in the office. But I think the power of the hybrid is the company needs to maintain that culture, because for me, again, the culture is so important, and that people need to feel they belong to something, that there's a team spirit and there's a synergy that you can have when everybody's kind of pulling in the same direction. So that's really, really important. And then, like, in terms of well-being, what I'd like to say is that, that it is an integrated part of all the HR strategies within organizations, but the shape of it should change as situations change. So I think it should always be in flex, always being reviewed, integrated as part of, even things like the annual appraisal. But that was the big thing for us, for me, going through my working career. But more and more organizations have dispensed with the annual appraisal in terms of ongoing check-ins, sitting in, having a one-to-one with each colleague, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and less of a performance-driven one and much more getting behind to the person. And from that, if you then do that on an individual basis, department by department, you get fantastic data in for whoever is going to lead that program. I think it is going more away from HR and into people management, and that they come up then with a new strategy for how they're going to deal with whatever's facing them. So I do think it's here to stay, without a shadow of a doubt. As long as there's people in the organization, you have to look after them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm interested to see, there's one or two organizations talking about including, let's say, well-being metrics in their performance assessment, whether it's annually or more frequent. I'd love to see that. I'd be interested to see how that works. So like you said, it's not just performance. You have a well-being target or two as well. And that goes back to your point on the importance of culture. I mean, you can have, the fanciest, most expensive well-being program out there and fancy shiny offices, getting in celebrity speakers. But if you're not practicing your behaviors, the norms, actions every single day that are promoting and supporting a healthy work environment, where people can put their hand up if something isn't right, or they're not overworked, they kind of have a say in their role, in how their work is shaped. If you don't have that foundation, then you're wasting your time. You're throwing money away on these on speakers and on programs. Yeah. So it's back to the culture piece.
Yeah, no, I absolutely 100% back that all day long. And I'd even go another step and say, I'm not sure exactly, again, it's the I suppose the struggle when you're not in a day-to-day corporate environment. But what I would like to see, and what I had been thinking about, while I was still in my last role, is, conventional wisdom was people got promoted to a manager position and to a line responsibility based on their functional abilities. So if you were really good at your job, you were rewarded by being made manager or being made, a VP or all these, great titles where you had a team working for you. There was no training or support for that role. And when you think about it, you're going in to manage other people, but you've actually been managing yourself and your own performance. And unless they're all clones of you, they're going to be very hard to manage. So someone who approaches things completely different to you, you're going to want to make them like you. So I actually think organizations should have, a proper induction process for people who are taking on line management responsibilities. Yeah. And then that should also incorporate mental well-being. Because, you know, again, you know, everybody talks about their boss, or again, euphemistically, you hear that people don't leave the company, they leave their boss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's very, very true. So you have such a pivotal role for the organization, but you may not be given the toolkit to deliver that. You know, you're trading on your previous performance. And, you know, that's what I'd like to see coming into organizations as well, that, as you say, then it puts it into the planning process as well, and some of the metrics. You know, what gets measured gets done. If you don't have a target, you're going to focus on what you do have a target for.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think that's right.
That's an important point. The role of the line manager, again, is often overlooked in you know, workplace well-being programs, and the importance of the relationship with your supervisor. That can have a huge impact on your well-being in your role, how you get on in your role.
Yeah.
So so there's a lot to be said for it. Yeah. So watch that space with interest. Yeah, some kind of metric in there. The induction program is a good idea, I think, for if not everyone's cut out to be a people manager.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Listen, Adrian, you're busy. You've got a lot on. How are you, or do you manage to spend time on your own well-being?
Well, I think that's a brilliant question. And to be honest, one of the most important aspects to managing well-being is self-care. Mm-hmm. And, you know, again, often too many people think that that's, you know, same as being selfish, but it's actually fundamental to your own ability to perform and your capacity to be able to help other people. Mm-hmm. So I often talk about, you know, the mobile phone and the battery, and how we all panic when the battery level goes on. Mm-hmm. But I mean, essentially, we work as a battery during the day, physical exertion, but then stress, deadlines, relationships, everything drains your energy. So it's up to each of us individually to restore that energy in some way, shape, or form. And that's where self-care comes in. And that's why it's so important that that's what makes it not selfish. It's that I'm doing this so that I can be able to perform again, or that I have sufficient resource on board that if I see someone else who's struggling, at least I have the wherewithal to go and do that and help them. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if I just run myself flat, I'm no use to anybody. We all know the oxygen mask example. You know, if you don't put on your own oxygen mask, you're not going to be able to help anybody else around you. So I think it's absolutely fundamental. I do a number of things for myself that I think is really important. And like, the first thing is to actually include it as a daily routine. And I think often, you know, we're also used to doing fads, and we'll do our couch to 5K and tick that box and then go back to the way we were. So I think, you know, real self-care is you get de-energized during a day. So you've got to re-energize either that evening or the next morning, or in some way, or you're going to be in trouble. So I know you're a physical exercise guru, so I'm not going to come lock horns with you on that end of it. But one thing I did was over 20 years ago, I started doing a Korean martial art called Taekwondo.
Oh, yeah.
And I started that really as a form of exercise, but then also as a stress buster. And it's really stood me well down the years, in terms of it was a reason to get out of the office. And like that, I remember I used to go directly from the office to the club. And I would leave the office early at 6:30 p.m. Mm-hmm. So like, you're in at 8 o'clock and you feel bad leaving the office at 6:30. And then I said, look, the longer I stay, the more I'll be expected to stay. So Monday nights, Wednesday nights, Adrian's doing Taekwondo. So there's no point in expecting to see him after 6 o'clock, whatever. So it was brilliant to get me out of the office. But the other really, really powerful thing about it is that you're learning all the time, and it's both physical and mental. So what it does is it means you can't think about what you were doing earlier or what you're going to be doing tomorrow, or you'll get a fistful of fives in the face. You're not focused, you know what I mean? So that's how it was a stress buster. You weren't thinking about all the hassles that you were putting up with. So I'm delighted. Like I'm a 6th-dan black belt now, and I have a school with another training buddy of mine. We've been training together for that 20 years. So we teach adults in Blackrock on a Monday evening. If anybody's listening and they want to come along, so it's only adults. You don't have to worry about kids jumping all around the place. But that's been really brilliant for me, and it's a lifelong thing that you can do. Now, obviously, your flexibility decreases over time, but the mental part of it, the balance, the confidence you get for it, the self-defense element to it. So, there's huge benefits for that. And the other thing I love doing is mindfulness. And that's not easy to start with. And there's been a lot of talk about mindfulness, and it doesn't suit everybody. Not everybody, is tuned in to do it. But the other thing is, there's a lot of myths as well. So, you don't need to wear a toga or go up into a mountain and sit in the lotus position and all that sort of stuff. You can literally do it at your desk. But I put it in every day. I do some minutes. I don't do hours of mindfulness meditation. And the thing about the mindfulness is it's actually paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So a lot of people think that, meditation is about, getting into some zone or falling asleep. It's a form of relaxation, but it's actually a form of connection and bringing you back into the now. And when you think about anxiety lives in the future. If you're thinking about the future, you're going to be anxious. Whereas if you can train yourself to be in the now, you can reduce that impact. So that's really, really important as well. And then I just love getting out into nature. I think nature is fantastic. And, I'm lucky where I live. I can be in the Dublin Mountains in 15 minutes, or I can be down at the, Dublin Bay in 10 minutes. And it's just brilliant to get out. The problem is we convince ourselves we're so busy, we don't have time for it.
Yeah.
Make the time. It's so important. And what you'll find is if you make the time, the extra time you're not able to do things because you're so tired, you'll actually gain back. So it's a win-win, I think.
Excellent. That's a really nice kind of combination of activities you have there, from the taekwondo to the mindfulness to the nature. And you're absolutely right about, taking notice of spending time in the present moment. It's probably the space we spend the least amount of time, even though we're actually in it all the time, but it's the time we actually appreciate, I would say, the least. We're either reminiscing about something in the past, an action we did or didn't do, or as you say, we're anxious about the future, something that's coming up, planning or preparing for something that's coming up.
Yeah.
Whereas actually being mindful and taking the time just to take notice of the present moment is it can be powerful.
Yeah, and there's lots of bumper stickers out there and fridge magnets that are full of wisdom, but I love the one about where human beings, not human doings.
Yeah.
But we prefer to do. So the idea of sitting and not doing something, people struggle with because they say that's a waste of time. I should be doing something. Yeah. But to make that separation, I think is very helpful. And like I say, it's called a mindfulness practice as well. So, a lot of people are looking for silver bullet, solutions or magic wands. And the thing about it is, like you will know from physical exercise, if you build up a muscle, that's going to help you when you need to do something. Whereas, if you ignore self-care and then you find yourself in a difficult situation, you don't have the resource to fall back on. So, even your mind is like a muscle. You can work it, and you can develop resilience in the same way. So, we're all different. Some people think, oh, he's brilliant. He can do all these stressful things, but, stress for one guy is a buzz for another person. And, it just depends on what life is thrown at you, but you can actually work on your resilience and, protect yourself through self-care. I'd absolutely advocate that for everybody.
Brilliant. Well, you're doing great work advocating for self-care, for positive mental health as well. But Adrian, thanks so much for sharing all those details with us today. Where should people go if they want to find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Well, my website address is lizado.ie. I'm on LinkedIn as well with Lizado Services. They're the two main sources, so you'll get everything you need to find in there. So happy to help anybody in any way I can. I just think it's so important. So glad to be part of this community as well. And I think just to give you the clap on the back as well, Brian, I think the work you do is very, very important, because you bring different aspects of that community together, and you create a platform for people to share best practice and so on. And that's not always easy, because again, we all love to go and plow our own furrow and do our own thing. So I'm looking forward to some of the more in-person events that you've been doing in the past, and I know you're involved in the park hit and so on. So just getting people out. So keep up the good work as well.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Adrian. Really appreciate it. Talk to you soon. And that's a wrap for this week. Go to workwellpodcast.com if you'd like to access the show notes for this episode. Quick favor to ask. Can you head over to iTunes or Google Play or wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe, rate, and leave a review for the Work Well podcast? It would be a huge help. So thank you. If you want to dive deeper in the area of workplace health promotion, if you want to educate yourself in this area, then make sure to check out the Work Well Institute. It's our online learning hub. It's a one-stop shop for all your workplace well-being training needs. You'll find all the details at workwellinstitute.org. By the way, the original music that you're hearing right now was composed by my good friend, Greg Clifford. Check him out at gregcliffordmusic.com. Thanks for listening right to the end. Remember to work well, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode.